Все вошли, да, ребята? Сколько человек там вошло? Вот я участники смотрю.
Пока мы только втроем, Моля и я и Айдана. Сейчас все зайдут.
А Грег еще не вошел, да?
Нет,
Грег тут.
Тут.
Грег тут, да?
Да, тут.
Я здесь. Всем привет.
Окей, Грег.
Привет, Грег.
Привет.
Привет, Грег.
Вот.
Можете, ребята, все появиться, пожалуйста? Мольдер, поставь запись. Мольдер.
Поставила.
Да, это можете все появиться, чтобы видно было, что вы здесь? Я там написала, что мы в Zoom перешли, если кто проверять будет. Можете все появиться, включить? Да, вот еще. Там, чтобы Мольдер сделай так, чтобы всех было видно, что все были. Абдул, Басит Хия, Айдана, Аруна. Кто там еще у нас, девочки? Окей, Грег. Can I see you? Грег.
Can you?
Окей. Let me...
Okay.
Так как наша лекция, наш семинар на английском, то я должна как бы вести на английском. Окей, я начну, а потом Мульдер продолжит. У них все самостоятельно. Окей. Let me introduce you, my friend and our speaker today, Greg Gleason, хотела сказать, Greg Santos, and he's from the US. And today we discuss the multiculturalism. It's interesting, very interesting topic for us. And I think it should be like a brief 5-minute, maybe, Greg, for your introduction, maybe 10 minutes. And then each of students should ask you some questions about multiculturalism in the US. Okay, let's start. Мольдер, еще раз, сколько человек у нас в наличии?
7.
Мольдер.
7 человек.
Let's start. Пожалуйста.
Okay.
Greg, floor is...
Okay, so I'm starting. Okay. First I wanted to find out what countries are everyone from? Is everyone from Kazakhstan, or do we have students from other countries?
From Kazakhstan and Afghanistan.
Okay, good. Okay. As you know, politics in the United States are a very important topic right now. We have the elections coming soon. I'm sure all of you are very interested in the elections, and some of you maybe support Biden, some of you support Trump. Biden and Trump, they represent very well different attitudes towards multiculturalism. So whoever wins will have a big effect on the policy of multiculturalism for the next 4 years in the United States. I wanted to start first about talking about the United States and what makes the United States so interesting. So the United States is a really interesting country from the perspective of multiculturalism because it's a democracy without any ethnic basis. So officially, any person, any ethnicity can come to the United States and become a citizen, right? And this is it's a very new idea in the history of the world. If you look at Europe and all the countries there, for 300 years, what you had before, you had every person was a subject of the king, and then after that they became democracies. And it was, if you were French, you could be part of France. If you were German, you could be part of Germany. But in the United States, it was anyone could come and they could become a citizen. And it's a very new idea, and it contradicts. Do we know the word contradict? It goes against human nature. So human nature is from evolution, right? We evolved for millions of years, and human nature is that we live in tribes. We live in groups together, right? Kazakhstan has lots of tribes, and a lot of times people are reliant on their tribes. And so tribes and ethnic groups are a very important part of human nature and social structures and political structures. I'm sure in Afghanistan, for example, tribes are extremely important. Am I right, Abdul? Yes? Yeah, tribes are very important in Afghanistan, right? Yeah, so in the United States, we don't have tribes. We don't have any tribes. Although we sort of have one, and I'll mention it in a second. So the United States is a new idea, really, about how anyone can come to a country and become a citizen. Anyone. You don't have to be French. You don't have to be German. You can be from anywhere you want to be. And Canada also is like that, and now Australia, some other countries, New Zealand, and now Europe is changing as well. So the important thing to remember is that democracy that's not founded on ethnicity is a new idea that sort of goes against human nature, because human nature is very reliant on tribal structures, tribes. Why do we have tribes? We have tribes because we can depend on our tribe for support and for help and things like that. And so it's a good security for financial support, for safety, things like that. So that's why they exist. But you have these new states, these new democratic states, Canada, the United States, that attract everyone from all around the world, and they're trying to build multicultural democracies, right? So they're trying to build democracies that incorporate, that have everyone live, everyone from different ethnic groups live together in one system, and that's very hard to do, right? And so American history has shown that it's very difficult, right? Because America had slavery, right? Black people did not have any rights. It had racism against Asians, racism against Muslims. Lots of moments of racism. And so in American history, there's a tension, a conflict between democratic ideas, right? The American Constitution that says that everyone is equal and that the United States is a democracy, and the human nature that says that we want to limit who is considered a citizen, right? We want to say that only in the United States, right? Some people believe that only white people should be considered citizens, or should be considered part of the democratic system. So in the United States, until today, to this day, there is still a conflict, a tension between these ideas: democracy and a sort of racial tribalism, right? White people versus minorities, okay? And the United States has made a lot of progress, right? So slaves were freed and they became citizens, and then they were given civil rights. So what year were slaves freed? Do you know? What year were the slaves freed? Anyone in the United States?
Ну, давайте, ребята, не подведите историю США.
1861 or 63?
Okay, very close. 1863, yes, 1863, yeah. So it's called the Emancipation Proclamation. So this is really the first time in American history where minorities were given rights, right? It was said that, you know, these people have rights just like everyone else, and that the Constitution needs to apply to them. But over history, the rights of Black people were still not recognized. They were not given the right to vote. So we had to have another law, the Civil Rights Act. Civil Rights Act, do you know what year that was? Lyndon Johnson was the president.
I think 1864 or 65.
This is Civil Rights Act. So 1965. 1960. Maybe that's even 1965. Yes. So 100 years later, 100 years later is when we finally put into law that African Americans, Black people, would have equal civil rights as other Americans. And there have been other problems with recognizing the rights of minorities. Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans were put into camps during World War II. So over the course of history, in the United States, minorities have had a lot of issues. So it's something very important to remember. But the United States, to its credit, has become more and more diverse, more and more multicultural, and more democratic. So now, we had Barack Obama. He was president, and minorities. So minorities in the United States, right? Asians, Mexicans, Cubans, Hispanics, Muslims. They all are becoming more and more involved in the economy, in the political system. So there is an improvement, right? There's a big improvement from 1863 when African Americans were slaves and now, right? So the trajectory, the way things are going is a big improvement. But sometimes in the United States, we have a return to these old ideas of tribalism, tribes, right? And because we don't have traditional tribes in the United States, we don't have the tribes like in Kazakhstan, we don't have Madchijus and Starshijus, we don't have that. What we have are white people and everyone else, right? And so sometimes there are presidents, especially. So I don't like Donald Trump, and so I'll tell you that right now. And sometimes presidents try to use this hate, this racism, to their advantage. They try to use this to help themselves. So so Donald Trump, he tries to represent the interests of people who believe that the real Americans are the white Americans, right? And in America, it's very interesting, the idea of whiteness. What is whiteness, right? Because if you compare me with someone from Kazakhstan or someone from Japan, maybe their skin is whiter than my skin, right? But the difference is that I'm European, so that they wouldn't be considered by many Americans to be white. But whiteness, this idea of whiteness, is changing all the time. So it's very interesting how whiteness, who is white, right? Whiteness, who is white, changes. So in America, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Who is white, right? So in the beginning years of the 13 colonies, when America was first formed, it was only, white people were only Britons, from Britain, from France, from Germany. That was it. And they didn't think Italians were white people. They didn't think Jewish people were white. They didn't think that Russians were white. And then over the years, it gets bigger and bigger, and more people are included in this idea of whiteness. But whiteness is still a very powerful concept, and a lot of Americans believe that white people should be the ones who rule the country, who control the country, who have the power in the economy, in the political system. And Trump, he uses this to get his support. So I can tell you some policies. This is from this week, what Trump has done. So did any of you watch the presidential debate with Trump and Biden?
Yes,
Yeah? Okay.
the part on.
Good. Okay. It was very boring, but there were some things there. So Joe Biden, he asked Trump to condemn a white nationalist. So white nationalists, people who say that white people are the best and that they should control the United States. He asked Trump to say that they're bad and that he doesn't want their support. And Trump said he wouldn't. Trump said that he will not condemn them. He will not denounce them. Also, Trump is he just banned. Do you know the word banned? To ban, to like запретить, right?
Да.
So he bans in the U.S. government training for government employees, government workers, about different races and different genders and how to understand them better. So he banned this. He canceled it. He canceled it, right? This week. It was yesterday, I think. Yesterday. And also, he is now, his administration is now suing, they're suing, making a lawsuit against American universities that try to help minorities to go to their universities. So maybe they'll give them more money. Maybe they will allow them to enroll in the university, to go to the university with grades or marks that are worse, a little bit worse. And he is suing them now. He is saying that what you are doing is illegal. And so the point is not to say that Trump is bad. I mean, I don't like Trump, but that's not what I want to say. What I want to say is that from the perspective of multiculturalism, there's always a balance in the United States between, or a conflict, I should say. There's a conflict between democracy and the Constitution and multiculturalism, and this idea about who the real Americans are, and that America was founded for white people. Because remember, the United States, when it was created, was a slave state. It was a slave country. And in the Constitution, it recognized that slavery was acceptable. So there's a conflict between this, and some people in the United States believe in democracy and for everyone, and some people don't, and that's a big conflict in politics. And Biden and Trump, they represent these two sides, these two arguments very, very well. Because if you look at Trump, for example, his support is all from the states that were part of the Confederacy, the slave states, right? The slave states until 1863 or 1865 when the war ended. Those are the people who support him. So there's a very big division in the United States about these issues, about
Грег, я страшно извиняюсь. Грег, извини, пожалуйста, что перебиваю. Там они еще должны успеть вопросы тебе задать.
Ну, у нас есть еще 35 минут, нет?
Да.
Okay.
Ага.
Хорошо, я закончу сейчас. Тогда... Yeah, so there's this conflict, and the question is, this shows the conflict between Trump and Biden, and between democracy and racism, and multiculturalism and racism, shows how difficult it is to build multicultural society in a democracy, because many people, they think tribally, they think like a tribe. And when they see other people in other ethnic groups, they don't think of them as part of their tribe. But in a democracy, we have all different peoples, all different ethnic groups. And it's a very difficult system to make work. And that's why the United States is a very socially like you saw the protests. You saw the protests in the United States, right?
Yes, Black Lives Matter.
Right, 2 months ago, right? That doesn't happen in other countries. But that's because we have this conflict between what the United States is. Is it a multicultural country, or is it not a multicultural country, right? Do Black Americans have all the rights that white people have, or do they not? And it's a conflict that goes throughout all of American history. And that's it. So you can ask me some questions now if you want.
Так, пожалуйста, задаем вопросы. Пожалуйста, начинаем. Мульдер.
I wanted to ask you about the elections. So by
Okay.
the debates, I read one article that Trump has more chances to win than Biden because Biden wants also attract white Americans, and but also at the same time he's losing his own auditorium, and uh, and I think, like, I wanted to ask your opinion by your scenario or prognosis, who is going to win, who has more chances to win?
Okay. So really, it's just one question, I guess. Yeah. I think so. So I'll say officially. So all the different polls, aprosi, right? Polls. They say that Biden has a very big advantage. He has a big lead, maybe 10% of support, Podeshki. So there's two problems with this idea that Biden will win. One is that when Clinton was in the presidential campaign against Trump, she also had the advantage. She had the lead in the polls, and so the polls are not very reliable. And then also the problem is in the United States. This is another problem with the democratic system, and it's also connected to multiculturalism and to racism. And this problem is that not every vote is counted because there are a lot of things that politicians do in the United States so that people cannot vote or that their vote is not counted. So, for example, right now we have the pandemic in the United States, and many states want to be able to votes by mail. You know, by mail, right? In the mail.
You mean
So,
online?
yeah, maybe online as well. Yeah, but Trump doesn't want this. Trump is against this because it will allow more people to vote, and because he knows that many people do not support him, he's against this idea. And this was something also that was used against Black people in the 1930s, 1940s. They tried to intimidate them, to scare them not to vote. And this is a very old tradition in American politics. So in the United States we have elections, but not everyone has their vote counted, or not everyone gets to vote because they're scared to vote. Someone threatened them, or someone told them that the election that you could vote in one building and it was in a different building. So I think Biden will win, but I don't think that that it will be so close. I think there's a chance that Trump can win. Yeah, so it's not 100% that Biden will win. So
Thank you.
Okay, may I ask?
yes.
So, Greg, nice to meet you here. My name is Smbat, and I want to say just 2 words about what I understood about multiculturalism. So multiculturalism is a part of a broader political movement for inclusion of marginalized groups, including African Americans, women, LGBT groups, and the people with disabilities. Also in contemporary theories include ethnic minorities also. Minority groups defined primarily in terms of ethnicity, nationality, and the religion, as I understood. And Mike, I have 2 questions to you. As I've never been to the USA, I want to ask you, how do America educate their children to be tolerant and respect other groups' rights? Etc. Maybe at schools they have special classes on multiculturalism, or anti-racism, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the second
Okay.
question, okay. And second question, there is one critic opinion about toleration and the multiculturalism. It is toleration requires indifference, not accommodation. Like by this critic, people say that by granting cultural groups special rights and the protection, the state oversteps its role, which is to secure civility and the risks undermining individual rights of association. Critics say that states should not pursue cultural integration or cultural engineering, but rather politics of indifference toward minority groups. How do you think? I want your opinion about this criticism.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And this is part of Trump's criticism of multiculturalism. So he says that the U.S. government has engaged in social engineering, and so instead of being indifferent to different groups, different minorities, the government has tried to change society and force people to become accepting, and it's overstepped its boundaries. It's become anti-democratic in doing that. So I think there is a fair criticism because if you look at affirmative action, do you know affirmative action? So affirmative action is an American idea that we need to actively help or support minorities. So for example, for example, at a university, when they take students into the university, maybe they will take an African American with lower marks, lower scores than a white person with good marks, right? That's affirmative action, and a lot of Americans think that that's a bad idea. A lot of Americans think it's a good idea because there was discrimination against African Americans for many years, and now we want to help them. Other people say, well, what about the white people? It's not fair. It's not fair to the white people to experience that. So I think your the criticism you shared with us is a fair criticism, and there are some countries that have an indifference. They have an indifferent policy where they allow all ethnicities to coexist, but they don't meddle. They don't get involved in the politics. In the United States, we have had a lot of multiculturalism where the government is very involved in forcing multiculturalism. So I think that's true. About your first question, in terms of how students, or excuse me, how young people are taught about multiculturalism. Well, the first thing is that many Americans live in multicultural societies, so their communities are very multicultural. Like for me, I grew up in a community where there were Jews, Hispanics, African Americans, people from India, Indians, who else? And Asians as well, Asians from China. And so for me, it was normal. It was very, very normal to be in a multicultural environment. And no one needed to tell me, no one had to tell me that I should be multicultural because I grew up in a multicultural environment, in a community. But I will say that we also have at schools, we have different subjects that we learn about. So American history talks about how all different people, when you study American history at school, you learn how all these different people came to the United States, and we became one country together. So it's about creating an ideology for young Americans to believe in, right? That we are all together in one country, all these different ethnicities. And then in literature classes, it's very common now to read literature of different ethnic groups in the United States. So very, very common now to read African American literature in U.S. schools, so that we can understand better the perspectives, the viewpoints of minorities. So that's another thing that happens in schools, so that students can learn about the viewpoints of other ethnic groups. And then also we have in the United States, we celebrate all the holidays for different ethnic groups. So where I grew up, we had Christian holidays, we had Jewish holidays, we had some African American holidays, and they're all considered part of the American tradition. So in the United States, a lot of it is just about the community that you live in is very, very multicultural. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Пожалуйста, Айдана.
Okay. Hello?
Айдана, время.
Yes. I'd like to ask a question about the overall situation or atmosphere in America after that Black Lives Matter movement. Because the American people and the other countries all over the world, they roughly divide into two groups, right? The ones who support that anti-racism movement and the ones who do not support it, basically. So and there have been some speculations about the presidential elections, because some people have been saying that Trump is going to win because in America, like white people supremacy sentiment is prevailing over the ones who support anti-racism, right? So what do you think about this situation?
So, well, I think it's unlikely that Trump wins, first of all. But yes, I think that more people became afraid of minorities, afraid of African Americans after the protests. Now the protests are just really that minorities, and especially African Americans, they want to have their rights recognized. They, especially when it comes to when we talk about the police, right? So that the police are fair and respect their rights. But a lot of people, especially white people, saw this differently. And so this maybe will help Trump in the election. And he intentionally said that all these protests they're violence, they are attacks on the government and things like that, when really most of the protests are peaceful and they just want the governments to respect their rights and for the government not to kill minorities. And that's the main point of the Black Lives Matter movement. But again, we have a president, and he's not the first president. Many presidents have done this. A president who is using race, the issue of race, to get support. So in the United States, it's called. We have two different phrases. We have race baiting, which means that a president is using race to get support, or he's we say blowing the dog whistle, which also means that he's referring to race but very quietly. Trump is not doing it so quietly, but he's continuing this tradition where he's trying to get support from white people, especially white people in the countryside. So these are farmers, people like this, people who don't interact with African Americans very much. They never have any experience with them, and so they're afraid of them. And all they see is what they see on television. And so Trump is trying to get their support by showing them the protests and saying, look, you know, these people are very dangerous and only I, Donald Trump, can protect you. So I think maybe he will get more support because of the protests, but it probably won't be enough to help him to win the election, because he's not a very good candidate, and he has coronavirus now. So.
Абдулбасит? Нету его, что ли? Нету? Окей, кто там еще у нас остался?
Наскен.
Наскен, пожалуйста. Наскен. Появись и задавай вопрос. Наскен. Наскен. Или я не могу подключиться, или она.
А может быть, у вас есть вопросы?
Мне кажется, она.
Фатима Туровна?
У меня вопрос есть, да.
Или
Но
вы
я хочу,
тоже
чтобы
не
мои студенты
подготовились?
задали. Я не подготовилась. Пожалуйста, Наскен нету, да? А кто еще там есть? А где
Can I ask
Абдулбасит?
another question?
Here, Aidana has another question.
Вопрос.
Окей, Айдана, окей.
Well, you are saying that it's unlikely that Trump is going to win, right?
Right.
These elections. But when I watched the debate between Biden and Trump, Trump said that basically Biden's main aim is to shut down the economy, like shut down the America again. But Trump is going, well, he has already opened it, but he wants to keep it open.
Right.
And I think that a lot of people have suffered from this virus thing, right? COVID. So don't you think that because of these economic reasons, the most American people are going to vote for Trump, but not for Biden?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, again, I'm saying this objectively, not because I don't like Trump. I mean, I don't like Trump, but this is not the reason I'm saying this. Anything Trump says is a lie. I mean, it's not true. And even journalists, they count how many times he lies, and he's lied more than any president in the history of the United States. So when he says something, I mean, he says some true things. But you have to be very skeptical about what he says. So when he says that Biden wants to shut down the economy, that's obviously, it's either it's a lie or an exaggeration. And I don't think Biden doesn't want to shut down the economy. But what he wants to do, most likely, is he wants to force people to wear masks. So like you have in Kazakhstan, or officially like you have in Kazakhstan, is to make it a legal requirement that people wear masks and things like that. So take measures to make it safer. As far as I know, Biden does not want to shut down shut down businesses again. But see, Trump was trying to scare people. So Trump is the kind of politician who tries to use emotions to scare people, and he thinks that. So usually there's two different kinds of politicians. There's politicians that try to reason with you, use their intellect to show you that they can help you and that they have an agenda that will help you. And then there's other politicians who try to scare you. And Trump is more of the kind of politician who's trying to scare people. And he's one who appeals more to people's emotions, right? So the emotions that he uses are fear of chaos, fear of the other, fear of Black people, fear of Muslims, things like that. And so no, I don't think Biden will shut down the economy. But it is true that Trump wants to open the economy because he thinks that coronavirus is not real, that it's a hoax. And so yes, Trump wants to open the economy more, yes. But Trump isn't the one. He is not the one who decides a lot of these issues, right? In the American system, we have the federal government, and then we have the states. And the states also decide what businesses will shut down and which businesses will not. So Trump doesn't have that power to open businesses in every state.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The questions? Greg, а я на улице. Greg, мне интересно. I'm interested in intermarriage and multiculturalism in the USA.
Oh,
What can
okay.
you say about intermarriage between Black people and white people?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Fatima Farah. Thank you. So I think that, so it's still very uncommon in the United States, specifically Black people and white people. So you'll see more white people, Asians, whites, Hispanics, things like that. White people and Black people, it's much less common, but it does happen. It does happen. You have to remember, in the United States, until the 1970s or 1960s, it was illegal. So if you were white person or Black person, you tried to marry a white person, for example, a Black man, if you tried to marry a white woman, in many states in the South, they would not let you. They might even kill you if you tried to do it. So so it's still historical issue. There's still a divide between whites and Blacks in that sense, but it is more common. It's more common now than it was before. So maybe in 20, 30 years it will be even more common. But yeah, it's still, I think the fact that there's not a lot of intermarriage between whites and Black people, I think shows that we still have not ended racism completely. And, you know, white people, or sorry, not white people, people in general, they want to marry people with same education, right? Same backgrounds, with material backgrounds. So same amount of money, or maybe more money, something like that. So the fact that African Americans in the United States, statistically, in the statistics, they have less education and they have less material wealth, it means that probably, you know, white people, for example, would be less likely to marry Black people because of that reason as well. So hopefully in the future, you know, if the United States can have African Americans become more wealthy and become more educated as well, then you'll see more intermarriage too. So.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other questions? Я могу, Грег, попросить тебя, если вдруг у моих этих магистрантов, это второй курс, по их диссертации возникнут вопросы по США, они могут к тебе обращаться?
Конечно, да, без проблем, да.
Да. Тогда у нас уже 40 минут прошло, тогда мы заканчиваем. Грег, спасибо большое. Я думаю, что это не последняя встреча. Thank you very much. И дети мои куда-то пропали половина.
Грег, спасибо большое. This was really interesting.
Good.
And hope to see you again.
Yeah, it was nice to see all of you, and I hope it was interesting and informative.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
How do I close this?